Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CoinGeek weekly live stream. I'm your host, Kurt Wuckert Jr., recovering from a chest cold. So you're gonna hear it a little bit in my voice, and if I get a little gurgly, I apologize ahead of time. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm on all the drugs I can possibly stand during a workday. But I'm really glad to have you. If you are currently tuned in, thank you and hello. Please like, subscribe, hit the alarm bell just to be reminded every time we go live. And please share this across social media. If you share to Facebook or Twitter or Gab or Twitch or wherever the hell you go, please let them know that we are live. We're going to take live Q&A with a man who has frankly become an old friend at this point. We got Dave Mullen-Muhr from from all over the place at this point. Unbounded Capital, Unbounded Enterprise, Nifty Jigs, Duro Dogs, and all the other stuff. But Dave's got his hands in a lot of things. He's been a key investor in a lot of your favorite apps and tools and companies in the space as well. And Dave's got a really good team of guys that I just frankly really like a lot. They are a good group of dudes that have a vision and have been good at raising capital and doing a good job, really supporting what have ultimately been a lot of winners. When you look at the portfolio, it's like, oh, these are like essentially all the things that I use on the regular. So good on them. They got a good eye, and ultimately, I think it's going to pay off in the long term. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the universe before we cut to our ad and come back with Dave. There's a very interesting situation going on with the money. So the inflation thing, the problem of inflation, it looks like the U.S. government wants to solve by sending out more checks. So we should expect some blowback on that with your purchasing power. But it seems like it's also kicked off a little bit of a bull run, a bull trap, or something. But we've seen a lot of bullishness in the market. But the curious thing is that BSV has actually outperformed BTC for most of the last 2 weeks, which nobody was expecting on crypto Twitter. So this isn't necessarily a buy signal, but it looks like $74 BSV might have been the very bottom of that. I shared a chart earlier. I haven't shared a public chart in quite a while, but I became bullish on some of this news and ultimately the stuff that's being built in the space. Despite some of the problems that people perceive, there are builders building cool stuff, myself included. I've just decided, you know what? I'm going to take the reins on anything I can take the reins on. So we will be making South Florida Citadel announcements over the next couple of weeks, groundbreaking ceremony stuff, grand openings, and whatever. I recently spoke at Duke University and to their development. Basically, they're one of the only blockchain schools in the entire country, maybe the world. But Berkeley and Duke are two of the only universities in the U.S. that have a blockchain specific program. I spoke at the Duke one and blew their minds. They've all been very obsessed with Ethereum, and I got two snarky questions about whether or not you could build smart contracts on BSV, and then I got about 20 very curious questions after once they realized I knew what I was talking about. So we've got some new and interesting folks coming out of the area or coming out of that university and coming into the BSV space. So some pretty interesting stuff there. Also, next week, we are a week away from some of the big stuff going on in Miami. Alex, have we announced this stuff? Can I announce this stuff? I forgot to ask. So, all right, I'm getting the no. Be in Miami. Just trust me about it. The Bitcoin 2022 Madhouse. Max Kaiser may or may not be baptizing people in the name of Greg Maxwell. I expect to see some straight up sacrilege happening. Maybe they'll do a human sacrifice at some point, and I'm going to be there to catalog it all with some of my intrepid friends. So for real, come to Miami. We got some really fun stuff up our sleeves. You're not going to want to miss it. If you're in Miami, we'll have multiple events hosted by multiple people. Tell them. He's saying, tell them. All right, what the hell? We're going to call it the CoinGeek Bitcade, everybody. We are so we are renting out location and stuff to be announced, but we are going to be in one of the swankiest bars in the South Beach area. We're renting the entire place out. We're going to have a giant BSV powered video game arcade where you can play for hours and hours and hours. Get yourself on the Haste leaderboard, do some crypto fights, play Saddle Runner, some of the other stuff. We're going to try and get some Duro Dogs action going on there, which maybe we can talk to Dave a little bit about. But ultimately we are putting together what is going to be a very fun party. So please join us. Keep your ears open for more official announcements and schedules and everything else. And yeah, you know what? It's been 6 minutes. Alex Moon is right again. I have overshot my 2-minute intro mark. So let's get to.
Life is short. Get out and get active. Immerse yourself in sound. Play hard and taste delight. Share your moments. Live a life of style. Activate your lifestyle. Shop your favorite brands with Bitcoin SV. Activate your lifestyle with CentB today.
What's up, Dave?
Thanks for having me.
For sure. Really good to have you. Dave, for those who don't know, can we, see John Pratt. Thank you. Mr. Moon over here. Like, this executive producer thing is a role that can be revoked, my friend. You just don't you mess. Dave, what's your Bitcoin story? For those who don't know who the heck you are, let's hear your brief on why Bitcoin, why BSV, and everything else.
Yeah. So as we were kind of discussing before the show, it had a lot to do with a in-person BSV meetup that I'm very thankful to Joshua Hensley and Ryan Charles for hosting in the Bay Area. That was the BSV intro. Kind of a couple years before that, I got interested in Bitcoin more generally. Started working with Zach Resnick at Unbounded Capital, like a year after kind of my first intro to Bitcoin. And we had a kind of a broad investment thesis. We invested in a lot of different protocols, and we were doing a lot of due diligence, at least, on a lot of different protocols and token solutions and all these things. And we kind of just had this sense that this kind of feels off. There's a lot of noise here. We're not having a lot of success finding something that makes a ton of sense. And it wasn't until that meetup that I mentioned in San Francisco that we really were like, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense. There's some really smart people here. And we kind of just dove down that rabbit hole, kind of rethought everything we thought we knew about Bitcoin and crypto, pivoted the whole focus to Bitcoin SV and scalable blockchains, which today really is Bitcoin SV. Luckily, we had some very flexible investors that went along for the journey with us. And today, I'm still doing that. I'm still a partner at Unbounded Capital, but I'm spending a lot of my time also at Nifty Jigs, who we're building with a lot of the tools that we invested in at Unbounded Capital. So kind of a nice synergy across the two orgs there, but really starting to build, which I think is what I initially got excited about when I learned about Bitcoin. And it's fun to kind of full circle come back to it and get my hands dirty a little bit. So
it's an interesting thing trying to deal with limited partners, I'm sure. Like, hey, we've changed our investment thesis. Was there a key thing that you used in explaining this to them? I imagine they started in a similar place, like kind of a high level understanding of blockchain, but why the hell would we pivot? So what was your pitch to them about it?
Yeah, it's also, these are our early LPs. So a lot of it is like largely Zach, like, hey, I met Zach Resnick. I really like him. I think he's a smart guy. I'm going to invest in Zach Resnick. So that's kind of the relationship for a lot of these early LPs. We did have, we do a ton of content. So we're all young guys. So we established kind of our public presence through content. We also did this internally, a lot of webinars, a lot of conversations.
Sure.
But fundamentally, it's the pitch. It's like, hey, all the stuff that we were excited about doing on blockchain, it needs to scale to do that stuff. And this is the way that it scales. So this kind of has to be our focus as fiduciaries, as investors. We can't invest in something where its success is its own demise because you have a product that gets big and then it crashes the network.
Yeah. Now, I think actually bringing up Josh Hensley again, I remember him saying that with something like Ethereum, the more it succeeds, the more it fails. And that's something that has really stuck in my mind, that, it's true. I look at the opportunity cost of having bought BSV at $150 instead of Ethereum at $150. But then, what could I have done with it other than, let it sit there essentially? So
yeah, you get into the CryptoKitties scenario where you have success, it kind of breaks the network, and then you're like, okay, well, now we have to build something from scratch. And they've had a lot of success doing that. And I think that team is obviously very capable. Mm-hmm. But did they just delay what already happened once for a second time? If that's the case, then, it's good for now, but it might backfire in the long run.
No, for sure. So let's, I think in a very basic sense, people understand what, an unbounded capital kind of company is. Like you get investors, you help incubate things like, whatever else. And you take some equity and help guide the growth of companies. But um, let's talk a little bit about Nifty Jigs, which, it's just one of the names you hear floating around. Like, let's assume I don't know what the hell it is at all. What is Nifty Jigs, both as a company and as a concept, and why should we care?
Yeah, so Nifty Jigs was kind of born out of Unbounded Capital in that we saw all this opportunity. We're allocating capital, we're helping entrepreneurs, but it felt like there was a lot more to do, particularly with companies that we have invested in, right? We invested in the tools that we thought were the best for helping developers make applications for end users or enterprise. So we could maybe play a role in doing that also. So that's what we're doing. So what is Nifty Jigs? It's a platform to create and manage digital goods, aka NFTs. Right now, we're focusing primarily on the use case of games, which we think is there's kind of a critical mass forming in BSV, but it's also just generally a very asset-rich sector. So NFTs as avatars or items or settings or animations or all sorts of things in games are kind of a very ripe use case. So we're building the platform to help developers create games and use NFTs in an interoperable way. And then we're also building the game to kind of demonstrate, hey, this is what you can do with the tools that we have.
Sure.
And that game is called Duro Dogs.
Yeah, for sure. So you guys are a big investor in Run, as I understand it. And frankly, one of the early ones. Run was an idea 3 years ago. I remember Brenton giving his presentation at CoinGeek on stage in London in 2020. And it was like, hey, that sounds very cool. But my problem right at the gate is, how does he fund himself? Like, what happens when Brenton gets bored? And I was really glad to see a small handful of people invest in Run, which, made me bullish conceptually. But what was it like jumping on Run? Why Run? And then can you explain the relationship of Run to Nifty Jigs?
Sure. So why Run? Largely when you're investing in an early stage company before, pre-revenue, sometimes pre-product, it's about the vision and the team. So the team was Brenton to start, and we love Brenton. Yeah. His background is great. He has a very good sense of, I think he just aligns a lot with our thesis of where the space goes. And he built a super scalable solution to do tokens and smart contracts on Bitcoin. So now, we invested in that, others invested as well. And now we're using that with Nifty Jigs. So what's the link to Nifty Jigs? Nifty Jigs is kind of primarily using two of the Unbounded Capital portfolio companies. The first is Run, so the Duro Dog game, all the dogs, all the items, these are all Run tokens. And then we're doing all the key management with another portfolio company, Handcash. So if you're playing Duro Dogs, you're going to log in and authenticate through Handcash. And that marriage of those two companies, I think, just really delivers a great user experience, which is kind of our top priority. We want to appeal to the large market of gamers, which is, billions large. We're not really trying to focus on the crypto space.
Yeah.
So to do that, you need a really good user experience, something that's comparable to what they experience with normal non-crypto games. And by using Run and Handcash, we're able to do that in a way that's scalable for, if we have a major success scenario, which is what we're building towards, we're not gonna crash and burn.
Yeah, no, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about, Duro Dogs. What does the plumbing actually look like versus what are we seeing in the interface? And I'm someone who has played. I think I have 2 Duro Dogs and I play, but I'm not a big gamer. I don't have a lot of time on my hands to sit and tinker with stuff. But my wife caught me at 11 p.m. probably 2 months ago. And I told her I was working, and she opened my office door, and I'm sitting here playing with a cartoon dog on the screen.
You're stacking dogs. You gotta
right. She's like, Kurt, what the hell is this all about? I'm like, no, I really am working. I promise. So.
Yeah, no, so I'm glad you asked that question. So this is one thing that I think we need to do a better job of communicating is what you see in the Duro Dogs game today. I think of it as there's a lot of potential energy in there. So we could have kind of built that experience, especially the MVP at launch experience, in a much simpler way that would have been much quicker to release. And it would have felt very similar. But what's so cool about Nifty Jigs is you can extend it so much because of kind of the work we put in the back end that's partially invisible, and we're kind of like slowly revealing this through expansions. So the basic game for people who aren't familiar, and please go to durodogs.com. You can start playing for free. You can earn NFTs. You can make money. People have started for free, spent nothing, and made hundreds of dollars already. But the experience you'll get in the Durodogs trainer, which is kind of this initial game, is kind of like a Tamagotchi experience. So you'll create a dog. This is an NFT. This is a one of one. But unlike other NFTs, which are really scarcity focused, so it's all about, hey, it's 1 of 10,000. And kind of the value proposition is you're going to buy this, and in the future, somebody else will want to buy it for more. That's largely what the utility is. So with this, it's not really about that. There could be 100 million dogs. There could be more than that. They're all going to be unique. So just like your real life dog, this is your dog. It has these certain attributes. Okay, so you get your dog, you name it, and now you can start to level it up and train it through these different play actions. You're petting your dog, you're feeding your dog, you're doing tricks. As you're doing that, you're leveling up. You're also earning treats, which are an in-game currency. And then you can use those treats, or you can use BSV to buy other NFTs, like hats, collars, glasses, stuff like that, to go on your dog. That's kind of like a dress-up game in its current stage. You can get rare items. Also, the main thing I already forgot, the main thing is digging. So like this is kind of emerged as the main thing. We didn't design it that way. But you can dig to find rare items that are buried underground. And people are digging. I mean, there's been over 1 million digs since launch. Nice. People are digging like crazy. So
is every dig a transaction?
Every dig is not a transaction. So we could pump those numbers if we would like to. What our transactions, what our transactions are, every time you add some attribute to the dog. So if you increase the experience will go up. If you change the name or the initial naming of it, these all kind of reflect on in your token, and that's like on Bitcoin, this public ledger, which is useful because then other games can reference it. So this gets to kind of the potential energy thing. So what we built is fun. I think people are having a lot of fun digging, like I said, but it's going to get much more interesting when people can take the dogs or the items that your dog wears and bring those across into other games and experiences. So the first kind of taste of this is a game called Rough Runner, which is currently live for a group of like 200 testers. We'll launch this in a couple of weeks. But it's a different game, kind of separate to the trainer experience. And you view your dog in a different way. So you can see this kind of 3/4 view, like a side scroller view of the dog. And it's more of a competitive game. So it's an infinite runner, and you're trying to run as far without running into any objects. So what that's kind of demonstrating is the ability for third-party developers or us kind of in-house, taking your dog, bringing it into other games and experiences, but you still have this consistency of, okay, this is my dog Spot, and he's a level 10 dog, and he has this hat, and that's kind of consistent in and across games, which is really, that's like what people talk about when they think of the metaverse, this like way to kind of move seamlessly around the internet. Yeah.
So given that it's based in Run, would it be possible, like, if you had a handshake with the Crypto Fights people, could you utilize your Durodog items against an ogre in Crypto Fights, or is that something you guys have considered, or what are you guys thinking going forward on that concept?
Yes, there's no reason that that's technically impossible. It's not really the emphasis for us today. So primarily what we want to facilitate is the ability for developers to kind of like extend a game.
Yep. And
so like we're trying to create this critical mass around Durodogs so that there's an incentive to come and kind of like add onto it in their own self-interest of the developer to kind of monetize that. But then also to add to the experience of Durodog owners who, today they have this game, tomorrow they have like 3 other games that they can play. So yeah, the short answer is it's not technically impossible. It's just not kind of a priority today.
Sure. No, it's fun. I think a lot of people, they're not sure what the heck a metaverse even is supposed to be. Like, I think it's one of those buzzwords. In fact, just like NFT, like people think an NFT is a JPEG, and it's like whatever. It's just like this colloquialism that people just they live and die by. But it's like, no, you're technically wrong. How do we? And I think you guys are doing a great job in teaching it. Like, oh no, these things are NFTs. This is what you are playing, and it allows people to have a practical application that shows that an NFT is more than just a given thing. But like, how do we expand into metaverse. I mean, is there going to be a dogverse like situation going forward? Is that the roadmap, or?
I mean, I think people think of the metaverse as like a place. Like, let me know when I'm in there. Like, am I in the metaverse now? The metaverse is just like this way to move across in between things seamlessly. So I think I think a lot of companies, like namely Meta, has this idea of like, we're going to build a metaverse, which to us is kind of, I think, a silly goal because it's just too big of a project for one company.
Yeah.
And if one company did build the metaverse, it would be Ready Player One, which is, a dystopia. Right. So like really what we want to do is build the tools to help the metaverse emerge in kind of a bottom up way. And I think those tools are really like inside of Bitcoin, but just interacting with raw Bitcoin is too difficult for someone that just like wants to make a game or like wants to design a cool sword to be able to do that. So I think like our goal is just build the tools that can help this kind of organically emerge, which I think is just the outcome of the incentives of everybody. It's like building a country, like in physical space, right? You don't try to build it. You just like, this is going to emerge naturally, but you need the tools to kind of build the building blocks.
Sure. So it's interesting. I always come back to like, when I think about Facebook Meta for their metaverse, it always reminds me of AOL. What people don't know, or a lot of people don't know about the history of AOL. Sorry, I just almost like Craig'd it. People fail to realize the guy that created AOL actually started by trying to basically create Netflix, but he did it in like the early 80s. And so there was no infrastructure, but he was like, no, people are definitely going to want like video games, movies distributed directly to them. And it's like, he had this business that went bankrupt and whatever, because he's like, oh shoot, like I actually needed to invent the internet first. And so like what he ended up doing is creating AOL ultimately. And then AOL ended up being the great distribution channel. But it's like you said, it's this sort of super sanitized, sterilized, proprietary corporate internet option. But it's kind of what people needed in order to say, oh, okay, my email's on the internet, my friends are on the internet, my forums, the stuff that I do is on the internet. And I think, so I'm a little bit worried that Facebook might actually do quite well in a window with it, because like, oh, I can click into Facebook and like now I'm in Meta. Like, what happens if I die in the metaverse? Would that, so like, you get like, these people like getting this little experience, and then like 5 years out, they realize like, oh, I hate it here. I'm going to go to the big open one that like the smart people use. So do you think there is a place for that? Like, should we be trying to integrate in some way with Meta with maybe a grander plan to move past it? Like, what do you think of stuff like that?
I mean, I think you're right. I think Meta is useful for telling the story. Like, I watched that big, video that they made with their announcement, and I was like, oh, great. They just like told what we were trying to tell with like a way higher budget for showing it visually. So like, it was useful. Yeah, it's useful, but I just think like, I think what you said is true. You don't want to get stuck in like Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse. So they might build a great, sexy one today, but the one that emerges organically through kind of incentives of like, hey, here's this game. And this already exists today. People are modding games all the time. Some of these mods are like incredible. People must be spending, like tens of thousands of hours making these mods. And it's largely free. I mean, maybe they'll like try to monetize it, and then like they'll hit with a cease and desist or something. So it's just like people already want to do this stuff. There's just no incentive. Micropayments add kind of all sorts of ways to facilitate this incentive. And then having this public ledger where you can kind of like put things to reference, which makes the technical aspect of interoperability easier. It's just going to like that combination of like solving the commercial problem and solving the technical challenge together, I think is going to create a better metaverse than what Zuckerberg can make, even though he can throw billions of dollars at it today. Yeah.
Alex, you can bring that question back up if you want to bring it up. I thought, that's a really basic question that I think a lot of people, I mean, it's certainly the question that, my mother-in-law was asking, what in her Polish accent, like, what do you think of Meta? Like, well, so does the metaverse require a virtual reality headset, or like, what is the metaverse? Can you give like an Eli 5 on what the hell a metaverse? We've kind of been pecking at it, but if you were asked to define it to a 5-year-old, what would it be, Dave?
I would say the metaverse is a place where you can move your digital items around as seamlessly as you do your physical items. So it could be a virtual reality experience. I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I don't know if you've like played with Oculus. It's awesome.
A little bit, yeah.
It's like so cool. Like I was playing, Jack and I had meetings sometimes where we play ping pong in Oculus and we just like chat about work stuff. And it's great. So it's like a very immersive experience. So I think there's a ton of reasons why people will experience the metaverse in virtual reality. But the metaverse, I think, is also like, hey, I bought a skin in Fortnite and now I'm using it in Counter-Strike. Sure. And like the ability to like move across, and like we take this for granted with physical stuff. If you buy a thing, you can use it for all sorts of other things. And people will like cater to like, hey, a lot of people have thing X. How can I create an experience where I could, charge them to like use it, and I'm going to amplify its utility. Just like recreating that in the virtual digital space, I think, is how I would define the metaverse.
I love it. I got Alex making fun of me here in the troll box that my Polish accent is terrible. That's exactly what she sounds like. Maybe she's not Polish. I don't know.
It's fake.
So it's such a fascinating thing. Like we see so many blockchains now. Now people talk about like AI, blockchain, and metaverse as if they're like a collective of things that are just innately intertwined, but we don't really see them intertwine almost at all. Is that just so? And let me back up a little bit. So that worries me about the kind of people that are involved in the space, because I feel like all three are a similar grift from similar people saying, oh, no, AI solves this, or metaverse solves this, or blockchain solves this. And it doesn't actually solve anything except, enriching the person who is claiming that it's solved. So what is the integration? I agree that there is an integration, just like in BSV. I feel like we're the people that are actually trying to solve this problem in a way that is fundamentally valuable. But what do you think is the way to get from where we are to a world where you actually do have like digital rights ownership, digital property ownership, either in, around, above, of your metaverse because of your keys? Like, what is that vision? What should we be working toward? And do we need to like establish some kind of a constitution before people start, literally living on their Oculus and going to work in Meta instead of going, commuting?
Yeah. I mean, I hope I'm not going to work in my Oculus. I get like motion sickness after an hour.
I do too.
Yeah. So I mean, that whole vision, I think, is kind of the dystopian vision. I understand why you'd think that, because 20 years ago, you used your phone for like 10 minutes a day, and now you use it for like 8 hours a day. Yeah. So I understand why people have that idea. But yeah, I think how we get to kind of like the final state of the metaverse, or it's not final, but like kind of what we're envisioning, it's just incremental. So you have to like get people using the tools that kind of facilitate this type of interoperability. So this is kind of the overlap of metaverse and blockchain. I agree that it's like people use these buzzwords. It's the Uber of this. It's, all these like ways to raise money. I do think that the metaverse and blockchain have like a very direct link, because if you want these things, these digital things to kind of move around seamlessly, they have to be in this place that you can reference publicly. So it can't be the current state of things where everything's kind of siloed off. So I do think that's necessary. I also think micropayments are necessary for the metaverse. And the only way that we know of today to facilitate micropayments at scale is with a blockchain also. So I think kind of that's a very obvious overlap. I'd have to think more about how AI works in there, or how the other buzzwords work in there, if they do at all. But yeah, I think like, how do we get there? It's going to happen incrementally and then very quickly, I think. Yeah. So it'll be kind of like slowly and then all at once. Yeah. But you have to start with something, right? So like we're doing that through games. And like, if you kind of hone in even a little bit further, we're doing that with Duro Dogs. We ultimately want to have like more games than Duro Dogs, kind of using nifty jigs. They could interact with Duro Dogs, or they could be separate. They'd be able to interact. They wouldn't have to. Yeah. And then we think like that will catch on. Games will become kind of like a very obvious place to experience the metaverse. And then once you go from games, you can kind of open it up to like all these other verticals, which are interesting, kind of like maybe a little bit harder to conceptualize because it's not as visual as an avatar or a gun in a game. Right. But really, it's like moving your identity online across things. skipping signups, not having a million passwords, kind of like all of these downstream benefits of this type of like metaverse world, I think they're gonna impact a lot of people in ways that like you won't have to know what the metaverse is. You'll just kind of intuitively see the value in what you're using.
Sure. Well, it's funny. I can't remember who said it. I remember it was somebody having a conversation about whether or not we need chips implanted in us and that kind of thing. And the response was, what's the point? Like, people already just use their phone. It's with them all the time. It has your biometrics associated with it. And you're doing most of your both personal and economic interactions through this device. So like, it doesn't need to be that you don't need to plug into anything. Like you have voluntarily become part cyborg. Like, your digital identity is more of your identity for many people than your real life. You know, like I know my Twitter friends, actually me and you, this is a good example. Like, we have had a long distance digital relationship for years. And, you know, when we bump into each other once or twice a year, it's always, oh, hey, you know, like, we've got all these other rich experiences, but I have next door neighbors that I say little more than, hey, how's it going to? And, you know, I've lived by them for years. So like, it's a very weird blurring of, you know, what's the goal? Where are we going? And, you know, what does it actually look like to participate in these things? Here's an interesting question from John. In that style, would it become possible to walk the real world with your Duro dog and have others see your dog if they're using the metaverse?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, what you're kind of describing, by the way, nice profile picture. What you're kind of describing is augmented reality, right? So whether that's like a wearable thing, or if that's just like holding your phone up, which people use that today. I remember you like buying pizza last year at BTC Miami with that. So yeah, I think that's kind of the vision. So somebody who wants to create that experience thinks that that's like a good business to get into. What we're offering is a user base of, you know, let's say like fast forward, we have 1 million Duro Dogs users. You could create a new game called Duro Cats where you can like see it walking by you with augmented reality. But why wouldn't you just extend this other game that already has a user base? And then on day one, you kind of, you know, people could bring their dogs from Duro Dogs into the augmented reality thing, and you kind of have this built-in user base. So we're offering that kind of critical mass and then the tools to extend it. So what would go into that would be like a 3D dog. So right now we have this kind of front-facing view in our trainer game. We have a 3/4 view for Rough Runner. Kind of like a different person that's not this XR person could just, or AR person could be like, oh, I think someone's going to find a use case for a 3D Duro dog. And they could just invent that. So they'll find a way to kind of make this generative 3D Duro dog that maps to the same specifications that we have, so that my serial number dog in trainer is the same in the 3D version. They could just make that asset with no, you know, game in mind.
Sure.
And then the AR person says, oh, I have a use case for that. And now all of a sudden you have Duro Dogs who made kind of the initial game. You have this designer who made this 3D asset in Blender. And you have this AR guy all kind of collaborating super seamlessly. All of their commercial relationships are mitigated through micropayments and micro licensing or revenue shares, all these new things we can do with Bitcoin. And they're all kind of sharing and simultaneously growing the same user base. So everyone wins. The user who has the dog wins because now there's this new thing. The developer wins. The asset creator wins. Kind of, it's this very let's grow the pie together kind of mentality. No,
for sure. Actually, that raises an interesting question. Like, what are the licensing rights to something like Duro Dogs? Like, if I come at it from, you know, I'm not even using your interface. Let's say I scan the blockchain for certain, you know, I find NFTs that are clearly interacting and I realize what they are. Like, can I program something that interacts with them totally separate from Duro Dogs, or how closed off is that ecosystem right now?
Yeah. So when Steve Jobs made iTunes, he kind of, I don't know if this is a quote or if this is just like attributed to him, but the idea is he's going to make buying a song just so cheap that like, so cheap and easy that why would you go on LimeWire?
Sure. Yeah.
And it worked pretty well, right? So that's kind of our approach, is we want to make it super easy to, you know, if you wanted to find all the dogs and bring them into your game, we want to make that super simple through an API that you can read some documentation and do. So would it like be technically possible to do it in a roundabout way? Possibly. But just like iTunes, we just want to make it so that like, it might even be free to you, right? Because you could do it where you're going to license this, or you're going to do a revenue share. So you can use all these assets and make a game, and it totally flops and it costs you nothing but your time. which isn't the case today, where people are already buying assets and buying all these things for games, but they're buying them bundled online. With
it's terrible.
Really
you have to buy a bunch of stuff you don't want. Yeah.
And you buy it all up front, right?
Yeah.
So kind of all the problems that we know of like selling digital items because you don't have digital cash, those exist. So we're trying to solve kind of the commercial and the technical side of it to make it so that you just want to use Nifty Jigs, basically.
No, that's awesome. Especially, you think about, I mean, that's really been my excitement around Bitcoin and tokens for really since I figured out that tokens could exist on Bitcoin. Like the concept of tokenizing assets was something that I was excited about before I knew Bitcoin could work. So I had this harebrained idea like, hey, what if we had a QR code system and a measurement system that was associated to it, and then a centralized database that could process value. So if I filled a 1 ounce container with sugar, it could have the sugar QR code on it, and we know that it's 1 ounce based on the thing, and you could scan it and say, okay, this is whatever it is, 10 cents worth of sugar, and you like create a commodity money tokenized in the system. The logistics were insane. Like you needed a blockchain and digital tokens in response to it. But when I first heard about Bitcoin and then ultimately tokenization not long after that, I was like, oh, that's my idea. That's how this can happen, And now with NFTs and people being able to create like, real digital identity for specific assets, which was not something that I had considered. It's just, it gives this robust ability of people to not just play the game, which, is great, but also, like it's an asset. In 20 years, you may pass down your Duro dog in your will, like, well, my kids get this dog, like this dog won, the Rough Runner tournament of 2028.
Right.
It was like whatever, like the same way people are about like sports memorabilia or rock and roll relics and stuff like that. So like, as these things get bigger and bigger, like it sounds silly, but like these video game massive tournaments are like bigger than the Super Bowl at this point. So having a digital asset that won a serious, digital tournament could very well be something that is completely outvalues like a Babe Ruth baseball bat or something like that. So is there like, do you have in your mind, or have you guys discussed like a way to participate in monetizing some of that going forward? I mean, you guys could be like Christie's or whatever in 20 years when all this stuff is like, wow, these guys invented this. Like here's a Duro dog that only, dug once and didn't do anything else, but they have the keys for it or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think so. One cool thing is you can separate the game from the assets. So we're creators of assets, the Duro dogs, the hats, the collars. We're also creators of this game, Duro dogs. I could imagine a future where Duro dogs flops, but the assets that we created are like super valuable. Maybe because, and not even just like from like a dollars and cents point of view, but just like widely used. So that might be because like they're the old, like maybe Duro dogs fails, Nifty Jigs is like this huge success. And it's cool to have like a BSV cap from the original mint, in 2020.
Sure.
So you could separate those two where you make this game, doesn't work out, but you're just licensing these items kind of in perpetuity, and people like Duro dogs are just like the dog. And in every game that you play, like there's this dog and that's your Duro dog. So I think that's a possible outcome. Hopefully that's not the case. And Duro dogs is also successful, but I think like either for us or for third-party creators, the fact that you can kind of separate those two things is interesting and unique. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
no, it was a pretty wild question, anyways. But how do people get into developing? Like, is there a public Nifty Jigs toolkit? Anybody can just like, could I just stay up all night, read the Nifty Jigs docs, and like launch my own thing immediately, or does there need to be a connection point with you guys?
Yeah, so long term, that's obviously kind of what we want. Short term, it's just we have to support people kind of in a more handholdy way for our initial users. So there already are developers that are building with Nifty Jigs, either for Duro dogs purposes or kind of like other games or digital goods purposes. Some of those things should be live relatively soon. But the direct answer is yes. So if this sounds interesting and you are a Blender artist and you want to make the 3D Duro dog, which I think is a very lucrative opportunity and something that like we would probably do ourselves. But if somebody came to us and wanted to do it, let's chat. So go to niftyjigs.com. There's contact info there, or you can just email me directly at dave@niftyjigs.com, and we can start a conversation. But long term, yeah, we want people just to kind of land on the site and start developing. We're also building a hub, we're calling it. It's going to have like a marketplace, but also a way to kind of view all the assets that you own or things that you earned or bought, but then also things that you created. So we're going to facilitate more third-party creation. There's already been a few collections inside of DoorDogs made by third parties like the woman of BSV. But we want to facilitate more of those so you can create your own line of hats and sell them in the game. So this portal will kind of be like your interface for seeing all the things that you've released, seeing all the things that you own, and then ultimately it's going to be a marketplace where you can buy and sell things as well.
Sure. No, that's awesome. Here's a little bit more of a technical question. How are the rare items generated? Is there just like rarity logic, or is there like how is that processed? And this is actually excuse me, maybe relevant to other, even just the JPEG drops and stuff that people see elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like why did I get a toxic banana on my head? Like, how does that stuff work? Can you explain it in a basic
yeah, I mean, it's not so sexy. It's just kind of a decision. So we have like kind of two types of items. We have items that we put into the store, which we'll just kind of decide up front. There's 100 of these, or there's 1,000 of these, or there's infinite of these, or unbounded, to make Craig not mad. So that's like one type. The other type, the dig items, we've been doing just like a percentage rarity. So we'll just kind of like choose that basically based on like the coolest thing, we make the most rare. And how many there are. We could do kind of a hybrid of the two also, where we make it super rare and there's only going to be 10. We kind of have those three buckets of ways to do it. But it's ultimately just kind of our decision. And if you're a third-party creator and you're coming to build on DoorDogs or making assets for DoorDogs, that'll be kind of up to you too. So we'll let the market decide, what is like the right price for a rare item, how rare should it be, kind of all these questions.
Nice. No, that's interesting. Let's right before we got on the air, I was doing a little bit of pre-show research, and news broke about a $600 million exploit in an Axie Infinity contract. As I understand it, I didn't look any deeper into it. I'm wondering if you saw the news yourself.
I'm on the same page as you. I saw the headline. I opened and haven't read yet the post from the Axie team. Yeah. But to me, it sounds like the folly of all these bridges and there's like multi-chain. There's like all these places to have a hack like that occur. Yeah. So I think, without knowing what I'm talking about, obviously I'm talking out my ass, but I think it's likely something to do with that problem, which kind of adds to the benefit of building on a scalable blockchain. Sure.
No, and that's why I brought it up, because I don't know what happened, but in my research on how the stuff works, everybody's very excited about their Polygon stuff moving to their, whatever, to their I can't even think of any of them. My AVAX tokens can be on my, in my Matic wallet or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's it's fine, but there's got to be a bridge. And those bridges are absolutely a massive security problem, especially when you're sending stuff over that bridge. Oh, there you go, Jackson. It was the bridge. Yeah, no, of course it was the bridge, because that's what it is. It's you steal something at the handshake, and that's almost always what it's going to be, because that's the easiest spot to hack. But in a world that we're envisioning, I think one of the things that BSV, the big differentiator is that we don't need multiple networks. Everything should be interoperable protocols on top of one network that allows you to use things like a stack. And so you can access things up and down the stack without ever leaving the network. So there doesn't have to be a bridge. Right. And it's much, much more like exponentially more secure, maybe even orders of magnitude. I don't know if orders of magnitude and exponentially are even different things, honestly.
We're also dealing potentially with, this is like maybe not a great point. I'm thinking of it as I go, but if you're like playing Axie and you have like $100,000 of Axies, you're not really a gamer. You're like a speculator, which is fine. But like,
sure,
gamers typically aren't like dropping $10,000 before they start playing a game. Yeah. So like we're catering, we're selling dogs for $2, and you can buy items for as low as 10 cents, or you could spend nothing and just kind of earn all these things for free. So I think if you're a game, you should like be kind of priced in the way that games are priced. And I think users of games will like be more comfortable knowing, I'm playing Dirt Dogs and like it's not like I'm sitting on this like massive gold mine. Hopefully things appreciate, but it's really like it's a game and it's for gamers. It's not a speculative investment kind of disguised as a game, which I think a lot of the really successful NFT games, ultimately that's what they are.
Sure. Yeah, you shouldn't have $600 million sitting in your hand cash wallet.
Hopefully it wasn't one guy, but yeah, you shouldn't.
So here's a question from John Pratt. I see some of the infinite items were showing sold out yesterday. Was that a glitch or is there a hidden limit?
I'm not sure which infinite items you're talking about. Sometimes we do hit limits, so like we won't have minted enough, and then you'll get the error saying like, "Hey, this transfer failed." We'll send it to you like in a couple hours. It may have been that, but if it showed in the store that it was sold out, either it was a limited time item, which we have those also, or it was just a glitch and hopefully it's resolved. But I'll check after the call.
Sure. So how hands-on do you have to be about stuff like that? Are you actively steering things like that, or is it a little bit on cruise control? Like something like that specific situation, you didn't mint enough. Is minting a process that you're doing daily, weekly, or is it just when needed? What does that look like?
Yeah, like within the next couple of days, that'll be automated. So it'll be like AWS, where like you need more computers throwing out something and they just kind of throw it automatically. So we'll have that system, which is better, and then you won't see those errors. For now, it's been just like, hey, mint a bunch of it, which we can do because it's super cheap. Mint a bunch of that thing, and then 10 days later, you're like, oh wow, people love that thing, so let's mint more. If it's like a 1 of 100 item, we just mint them all. But we've minted close to like 400, 500,000 NFTs already.
Crazy.
And we facilitated, like we're getting close to 3 million transactions, updating the status of those NFTs, sending those NFTs. So we're doing a ton on Ethereum. This would have cost us over $100 million by now. And our bill is, more typical of like a AWS startup bill. So
sure.
It's really a testament to what Bitcoin SV can facilitate.
No, that's fascinating. So why Nifty Jigs versus anything else? Do you have a competitor? Is there an SDK that you are competing against? I can't think of one, honestly. Is there something out there that people can also use?
Not really. And we kind of know this because as we go through the mock-up process, we're trying to like figure out like, how do we show this in a very like intuitive way for users? Yeah. And we like have things to compare it to, like, oh, this is what the Steam market does, or this is what the Unity asset store does. But it is different because like those products can't facilitate the use cases that we're facilitating. So for example, if you go to Steam, you'll buy like a skin for a game, but it's just like, it's very clearly for Counter-Strike, right? You can't use it anywhere else. Yeah. In our game, like you could buy a skin and it could be used for like 5 games. So like, how do you show that in a way that's intuitive? Like, how do you like, what's the taxonomy for the user? So kind of all these questions we're trying to solve. So it doesn't exist. There are similar things. One comp that I do like is the Unity asset store, but it's a comp that's a foil because like the user experience there sucks and you have to buy everything bundled. And there's like all this, people are just like stealing assets because they don't want to pay for it. And you have to pay up front. So like we're taking the Unity asset store model and improving it. So if we're successful, people will like move from that to Nifty Jigs and they'll be able to build games in a better way, make more money, but also kind of like facilitate this interoperable metaverse use case.
Very cool. Then how about types of games? Like, are there things that you are designed specifically for, but maybe not good for, some other concept? Or is it really a general purpose framework that could be utilized all over the place?
It's definitely general purpose. I think it makes sense to like join around a single type. So like we have this dog thing. So like I said, extending the dog concept makes sense. But you could do like all sorts of stuff with a dog. That's part of the reason we chose it. It's just like this very blank slate type avatar. Yeah. So yeah, I think in the future we'll have a lot of extending games that exist. I think we'll have people develop new games, and you could do that. You could build like Hash War, for example. So this is like also on our roadmap, something that we talked about when we kind of first were talking about Nifty Jigs. that doesn't really have any overlap like thematically with Throw Dogs. So it's going to be kind of its own thing. So yeah, we encourage kind of expansions, original things that will later be expanded. Kind of like if you have something to add to the ecosystem, if that's a game or an asset or whatever it is, like we want to be the place that you come to do that.
Sure. So what if I wanted to make like a, Doom, but it was Craig, running around and shooting, whatever Blockstream logos.
Yeah.
Like, are there, like what are the limitations to any of the, like, is Nifty Jigs running in its own infrastructure and you can handle 1 million transactions a day, or can you handle 1 million transactions a block, or, what is your infrastructure like if I wanted to build something that was complex and I wanted every footstep to be a transaction and every, my character and every item and everything to be an NFT, and like, do you have, like swim lanes, like ballpark limits in your mind, or like how big are people able to go in the near term?
That's a better question for our developers. I'm actually like not super technical.
Sure. No, it's okay.
From like a high level, the answer is like, yeah, like we can facilitate that. I mean, if you threw 1 billion transactions at us, like that would be a problem, maybe temporarily, maybe even for the Bitcoin network, but like just like the Bitcoin network would adjust, like we would adjust. So the answer is like, if you have a use case where you need to make all these NFTs and you want to kind of like ramp up the transactions that you're doing, we can facilitate it. Like come and let's have a chat. And then ultimately, hopefully, like I said, it's kind of just you log on and do it, and you don't need to ask anybody, and it'll just work.
Sure.
That's where we're moving towards. But to get there may be some intermediate steps.
For sure. No, it's interesting. I mention it because I'm pretty good friends with David Case from Crypto Fights, who his work has ultimately turned into, like, oh, here's a limitation that nobody could have guessed otherwise in Bitcoin. So like he's finding what those things are, like, hey, what are the actual technical limitations of this implementation of Bitcoin? And so I was just curious if you guys, have that in mind, like, because, some days it's 5 million a day and they're NFTs and it's just a ton of computation. And being someone like I've seen on the back end, like what it's like to mine stuff like that. And it's like, oh, shoot, we have 3 million unconfirmed transactions that are missing an input. And so we have to like recrawl all of it to find that missing input. And that's like computationally very stupid, but it means, we need to re-engineer a couple of things, like, going up the stack basically. So I'm curious, what does the research and development look like on stuff like that? And how, how even do you start to hit your own limits? Like, do you guys have a spam gun, like, or anything like that to sort of push stuff out and check?
Yeah, I look forward to kind of hitting some of those limits soon.
Yeah.
That'll be a good sign. In terms of like how scalable is our solution, I think we're fortunate to work with 2 companies that are like really thinking about scale fundamentally as like, this is something that needs to be addressed, obviously, if we're going to be successful with Handcash and with Run. So we're doing things kind of in a bit of a bespoke way with like both those implementations. And like, we're kind of like working closely with Brenton and the Handcash team to do that. I wish I can give you like a better answer. We do put in like, kind of the normal spam type filters so that you couldn't just like brick us by renaming your dog 5 million times in a day or something like that. Because that's going to update the jig each time. So we have like those normal safeguards. We've been pretty fortunate that we haven't had any extended downtime. Transactions fail, people try to buy a dog and it fails and get refunded, and they try again and it works. But yeah, these kind of like, we had 10 million transactions in the last day problems we haven't encountered yet. And I look forward to those soon, hopefully.
No, for sure. I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's just for me, looking at it as the Bitcoin nerd, I'm always like, how big is our plumbing right now? Like, see how many buckets of golf balls I can flush down the toilet.
Right.
So here's a question from Joseph Mallory. Is it open in the sense that DuroDogs could allow anyone to design their own dog and sell them in the market, or design their own game that the DuroDogs game could be used in?
Yeah, so we think that permissioning is still an important part of jigs. So if you're like a game creator, we don't want people just to like flood your market with their own things and kind of like, if there's still like this like property right of like, this is my game. So like DuroDogs Trainer, when you go to durodogs.com and play, that's our game that we built. The assets that we use in there, the Bitcoin cap, the haste cap, the gold chain, the dog, those are assets that we're licensing. I guess right now we're licensing it for free. But if like a third party made it, they could put a price on that or revenue share or whatever they wanted. And then you could use those assets in their game. We're going to let people design different items and put them in our game, but there's going to be a permissioning process there also. So we're going to have to like approve for basic stuff. Like, is this like a copyright infringement? Or did they just like copy our item and they're going to sell it for less? Stuff like that. So there's still like an aspect of permissioning kind of within your own garden. And you could build your own garden, so you can make your own game with DuroDogs assets. You could make the assets for that game. You could use them from third parties. But we still want there to be a sense of like, it's not just like anarchy where anybody can use anything. This is like a commercial system. So the incentive is to use things and collaborate, but it's not that just anything goes.
Nice. No, this is makes sense. This is a fantastic question. In fact, I should ask this question of every single guest. What have you learned about building on Bitcoin that you didn't know you didn't know?
Yeah, it's a great question. The process of starting Nifty Jigs and building DuroDogs has made me a much better investor, I think. Really, yeah, so there's like the Bitcoin stuff that I didn't know, but also just like, how do I start a business stuff?
Sure.
And those overlap sometimes. But I think it's been a learning experience kind of the whole way. A lot of the technical stuff I still don't know. So
Right.
A lot of that stuff is, we have a full team of developers and people that handle a lot of those things. But just like basic stuff of like, when you're running a business, it's like, how do I allocate resources most efficiently? There's a million things I could do. There's a million, and this is a problem with Bitcoin generally, is people are like, oh, Bitcoin solves everything. Right. But like, what's your solution? Because you can't solve everything. How? So like solve something and then like use that to build some momentum. And then eventually we solve everything together. But yeah, so like, I think that's been the biggest learning experience for me is, hey, what should we be doing? We've got this team. We've got all the stuff we could do. What do we do tomorrow? And then what does that let us do next week? And like, what kind of value does that deliver? What's like the order of operations? So I think all of those things have been a huge learning experience. Bitcoin's been great and Bitcoin works. So the nice thing about Bitcoin is like, I haven't had to like, me or my team haven't been like, damn, we're screwed. Like we chose the wrong blockchain. So it really works like in the, this is plumbing kind of sense. Like we're not really talking about Bitcoin that much. We're working on abstractions. We're working on Run. We're working on Handcash, SDK, and all these other tools, which I think is kind of a very healthy sign. That's how it should be long term.
Sure. No, absolutely. Here's this is my new favorite question. If a hacker steals your DuroDog, does Dave have a fiduciary relationship towards you, and does that require him to restore the DuroDog?
My lawyer advised me not to answer this question. No. So if someone stole your dog, so one thing, like we do have kind of more control over certain aspects of like just the way that we built it. We do have more control. So it's a benefit for things like theft where like, I think theoretically we could like restore some types of theft. But also I think like, because we're doing it in a way where there's like kind of more explicit access controls through Handcash and all these keys, it would also possibly be harder for there to be a theft. Obviously, like there's user error concerns, but do I have a fiduciary obligation? I don't know the answer to that. I gotta talk to my lawyer.
Yeah, get interjurisdictional court orders to send your dog's hat back. I'm gonna laugh about this for days. If Alex can't get out of Thai prison, can Kurt train his dog for him? This is actually a crucial. As someone who is a dog owner and likes to travel, I don't currently have a dog, but it's been a problem in the past. Can I take care of Alex's dog? It's
a great question, and it like makes me think of a certain entrepreneurial activity that's kind of emerged. Where right now you start with a level 0 dog, you want to get up to level 10 ultimately.
Yep.
We're going to expand those, and you could introduce things where like, I'm going to make a game, but you could only play my game if your dog's level 10. You could like do stuff like that if you want. So I think in the future, things like that will exist. So one thing that's emerged is people will you can send someone your dog and they'll like train your dog up from 0 to 10 and they'll charge you a fee and they'll send it back. And this like has emerged in our alpha marketplace in Discord. So people are just like training up dogs, and they're like branding it as like dog daycare, and it's pretty cool.
Sure.
So yeah, we've seen a lot of people making money, being creative about how they can add value to make some money.
Nice.
And one thing is watching other people's dogs. So the answer is yes, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's great. But you know, I live in South Florida, and there's a lot of wealthy people in the area, and a lot of travelers in and out. And so there's a lot of like dog palaces and like dog spas and all kinds of stuff like that too. A lot of them have very clever, ironic names that I just can't get out of my head when I drive by them. But
people will pay a ton for the real dogs.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like people get just as intense about their digital assets. So like there could be industries of, you know what, I need to focus. I need to go on a work trip, but I want my Turo dog to level up by X while I'm gone.
People also just care about their dog. So like we had we released on December 6th. And so it was like right around Christmas. So we like the backyard where you play with your dog is this like green field, but we made it all snowy and put a pine tree just for the season. But then we also released winter hats. And I have to go back and look at the data. But my hypothesis going into that was people would buy hats because they would feel bad that their dog was cold. I almost guarantee you that was a thing and will reflect in the data. If we like A/B tested like a winter item with a summer item during winter.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
No, if you can make that dog, if you can make the dog look pitiful and cold, you'll sell the cold weather items no problem.
For sure. Yeah, they're cute.
So Sam Williams, apparently the Satoshi historian of the troll box, asking if my attorney Dennis Mayaka delivers proof of the theft, will you guarantee the return of my dog? I think he would have to, frankly.
Yeah, I don't know Dennis, but he may be playing Duro Dogs. He may you can trade with him. Check out the Duro Dogs marketplace and see if he's in there.
No, for sure. No more questions from Sam. Sam, you can send me a DM. So, no, these are inside baseball jokes, good for about 24 people on Earth, but I appreciate them. Dave, is there anything you wish I asked you? Or is there anything you wanted to like people to know about Nifty Jigs or Duro Dogs that they may not know yet because we didn't talk about it?
Yeah, a couple things. One, so everyone that participated in the pre-sale months ago, we didn't forget about you. So I see some people being like, we got rugged. You didn't get rugged. We've been super busy making all these ways to use what at the time were called Nifty Jigs. Now they're called Game Drop Jigs. So we're going to deliver on giving people the specific serial number of the Game Drop Jig that they purchased. And then also having an interface to kind of manage those very soon. So that's coming. The first game using Game Drop Jigs is Duro Dogs. So everyone that bought a Game Drop Jig, they're going to have a Duro Dog with the same serial number. We're going to throw in some other fun perks as well. And then whenever other games are made, they could use Game Drop Jigs to kind of like send you items as really kind of like a distribution channel to like bring people into their game. Nice. So that's going to be delivered soon. We didn't forget. We've been busy trying to kind of build up the ecosystem. And I think we've done a pretty good job so far. The other thing is, well, there's a lot of updates coming soon. So just stay tuned. Rough Runner, if you don't have access to Rough Runner yet, you'll have access very shortly, days or weeks. Nice. We're also going to have we're working hard on the marketplace. So that should be another thing kind of coming up soon. And then other third parties that aren't the Nifty Jigs team that have been using Nifty Jigs, they should be making announcements pretty soon as well. So cool. A lot of things to look forward to. If you want to kind of add to those things to look forward to, if you want to be the soon that you want to see, get in touch. Like I said, Dave at niftyjigs.com. We'd love to have a chat about your use case and start the process of getting you integrated.
That's awesome. Dave, are we going to see you in Dubai in May?
I'm not planning on going to Dubai. I may be in Miami for kind of the festivities, the debauchery there. Yes. If I'm not there, other members of the Unbounded and Nifty Jigs team will be in Miami. We'll have at least one person in Dubai though. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Very cool. No, it was good to catch up, man. I appreciate everything. Durodogs.com. Where else do you want them to check stuff out?
niftyjigs.com, durodogs.com. Yeah, that's it.
All right, cool. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt.
Yep. So there you have it, everybody. Dave Mullen-Muhr from Unbounded Capital, Nifty Jigs, Duro Dogs, etc. Really one of the coolest guys to work with. Really good guy to just have a conversation with. He is very much a polymath. He's not just a Bitcoin guy. He's not just an investment guy. He's good on a lot of subjects and quite a nice guy. So if you need a guest for a thing, he's a good guest for a thing. I promise you that. For everybody watching, I appreciate you so much. I should probably wrap up as soon as I can because the kids are going to be waking from their naps and the house is going to become absolute chaos. So Natalie, thank you for taking care of the children, and thank you to my children, Ronan and Molly, for being awesome little kids. Everybody, check out all the stuff that we've been talking about on the episode, and please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell so you know every time that we go live. And please follow across all social media, both myself, CoinGeek, follow Alex Moon. If you want to advertise with us, talk directly to Alex Moon. There are packages available. And I have a little challenge for you. If you want to see me on more external podcast appearances, like people always ask me, Kurt, when are you going to get on Lex Friedman? When are you going to get on Joe Rogan? I'll tell you right now, they are not going to have me on unless there are a lot of people asking, hey, why don't you have Kurt on? Like if Joe Rogan hears my name 5 times, he's not going to care. If he hears it 5,000 times, he probably will. So I'm going to challenge you. If you want to see me on more shows, let him know I'd be a good guest. That's how I got onto the Patrick Bet David podcast. It's how I've ended up on Fox Business Channel, frankly. People just tagging me and saying, talk to Kurt about it. So that's a little homework for you. I do have back channels. We do talk to people, but it really is about demand. I can't just wedge my way into everything in the universe. There's got to be organic demand for it, and you got to show them. So I appreciate you, fans, friends, and everybody else who makes this show possible. And mostly CoinGeek. You've been wonderful to give me this platform, and I appreciate all of you very much. So without any further ado, I will wrap up. I am Kurt Wuckert Jr. This has been the CoinGeek Weekly Livestream. I will see you next week.
Life is short. Get out and get active. Immerse yourself in sound. Play hard and taste delight. Share your moments. Live a life of style. Activate your lifestyle. Shop your favorite brands with Bitcoin SV. Activate your lifestyle with CentB today.